So, by way of an intro, my name's Ros Barrants. I lead the growth of Leidos UK's business across public services, as well as chairing techUK's Public Service Board, and I'm also an elected board member of Scotland Is. So, as Heather said, in this afternoon session, we're going to consider the current state of digital and data public infrastructure, explore how industry can work with government to strengthen it. And as Julian opened today with Blueprint to Brilliance, Julian, that's definitely going to stick. In the panel, we're going to look at some brilliance already being built and then build on some of the earlier calls to action, to be bold, to be collaborative, and understand how better partnership will deliver the smarter state. So, next step is for me to get the panel to introduce themselves. So this isn't about me this afternoon, this is all about my panel. So if I can start with my colleague to the left, Richard Jones.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Jones. I'm Head of Cyber for Leidos in the UK. I've been with the company 11 years, and prior to that in the central government, working in security all my life, when secure by design wasn't even a thing. So now I'm proud to bring knowledge and expertise with a strong team behind me to help our customers solve some of their cyber challenges. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Richard's a slight change to the published lineup. However, as our head of cybersecurity, will bring some great perspective to the panel this afternoon. Matt.
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Wynne. I'm the Executive Director for Data and Technology at NHS Supply Chain. You may or may not have heard of NHS Supply Chain. Think of us as the invisible Tesco's that keeps the NHS powered day in, day out. Everything from the ward essential custard creams through to MRI scanners and everything in between.
Yeah, hi everybody, nice to be here. My name's Mark Watson. I'm the Head of Solutions at Leidos, User-Centred Solutions. And I'm here to tell you some fantastic stories about how we're improving public services and how together we can actually carry on improving those going forwards. Nice to meet you.
And I'm Georgina O'Toole. I'm Chief Analyst at Tech Market View. For anyone who doesn't know Tech Market View, we are the leading analyst firm focused on the UK software and IT services market. One of our specialist areas is public sector, a research stream which I came on board to launch in 2009 and led from that moment on. I became Chief Analyst in 2017, but I still have a view of the public sector, which I'll share today, having tracked it for scarily a quarter of a century, I worked out. So that's where my cynicism comes from, if that comes across in the conversation today.
Thanks, Georgina.
That's okay.
The number of times recently I work out years and then I'm like, stop working out how long you've been doing this stuff. Anyway, that probably sets the scene nicely for some of the conversation we're going to have. So the blueprint sets out the need for strengthening digital foundations that underpin service delivery, reducing fragmentation, building trusted systems that promote reuse, resilience and innovation. And more widely across public services, recognising challenges around realising efficiencies and, to some of Georgina's and my experience, the dependence on decades worth of old and very costly legacy systems. And that leads me nicely into my first question, which, Matt, I'm going to send in your direction as a heads up. So based on your introduction, recognising you're leading a multi-million-pound technology transformation, dealing with some of this stuff, decommissioning legacy technology, implementing a complete IT overhaul, driving resilience, scale, efficiency, and importantly, and this isn't obviously just about the custard creams, critical capacity across the entirety of the NHS supply chain. So to do that, you're working with multiple suppliers. Can you start with some thoughts around what's working well with that approach that others in the room might be able to bear in mind?
Yeah, and I think before you come on to what's working well, you have to kind of see the limitations of what we've wrestled with over the recent years. And I guess to bring that to life, we're running the core of our business on a 30-year-old VAX VMS mainframe, you know, the black screen, green text, updates every 24 hours, doesn't deliver the experience that anyone needs in this day and age. And we've been in process of actually trying to modernise a large part of our estate over the last 4 or 5 years. But that's been done on a traditional IT program mindset. Yeah, we'll get our requirements based on what we know today. Someone will go in a dark room, build it, and out pops a solution 2 years later. And guess what? It doesn't fundamentally change anything. We've driven funding based on in-year budgets, so everything's on a 12-month cycle, a very public sector challenge, I think, shared probably by more than just myself. And we've also had generic providers that do everything for us end to end, which means actually there have been priority calls around where the senior people and the skills and capability are actually pointing at our agenda at any one point in time. So they've been our challenges. What has that meant? We've taken small steps forward. We've managed to move the business forward a little bit around the edges, but fundamentally we're still the same beast with limitations, both technically and from a physical infrastructure point of view. We're changing that, and we've been on the process of really rethinking our end-to-end delivery model over the last 2-3 years. And it's all around, one, a single multi-year investment case that's anchored against a 10-year plan for the NHS. Because they are our customer. That's what we're here to do. And if we do that well, the savings for the frontline patient are material. Yeah? Because we can just release capacity that's spent doing things that people shouldn't need to do in a hospital. So the purpose and the mission is really clear. If you look at that over a multi-year piece, it means we can make the bigger decisions. These things aren't easy to do, and some of them are 2 to 3 years in the construct and build. And taking that approach in isolation, I think, is one of the biggest mindset shifts we as a leadership team for the business, and working with a shareholder and the rest of the NHS, have really focused in on. The second part is you can't have a generic delivery model. Right? We have to have specialist providers whose job is to do one thing. And for me, Richard is leading our outsourced security service. Yep. His sole mission is around my cyber resilience and delivering the right outcomes in a very targeted and specific set of ways that you just don't get from the old IT primes of the past. And all of my providers work in that way. And in parallel, we've built an internal capability that means we are running this as one team. It's not about the contract, it's around the culture, it's around the delivery mindset, and it's about working together. But then the most important bit is, this actually isn't about the IT, it's about the process, it's about the business. IT is an enabler. So we're going to process-led design, product-based delivery. Yeah? You can't go in a dark room for 2-3 years and think about what you're going to build and then come up with a solution. We've got to get more agile, it's got to be iterative, and it's got to be customer and business-led with very clear outcomes front and centre. Are we perfect at all of those things? At the moment, no, but we're starting the journey. We've got the providers in place. We signed one of the last big contracts for our application estate late on Friday night, and we're well on the journey. But this isn't about me and my team. Historically, all of the transformation in the business was pointed at me as, it's Matt's problem, he'll sort it. Actually, we're now the enabler and everyone's playing their role in a very different way. And it's about business leadership at the end of the day. I'll stop there because we could go down a load of rabbit holes quite quickly.
I think the insights are incredibly useful to many in the room, whether from government or from industry. So just building on that, so you're operating critical systems.
Yep.
And you've got a complex supplier landscape operating those systems.
Yep.
Systems that are, of course, exposed to risk, which we need to tackle as they're transformed. There's a lot of talk at the moment about security by design. I'm going to start with you, Matt, and then it would be great to get views from everyone else on the panel. How do we actually, whilst doing all of these complex transformation, deal with security by design at scale?
There isn't a silver bullet for that. And I think our learning is, actually, the more we have modernised our estate, the greater the fragility between the different components are, yep. And the greater the need for security by design and other aspects actually to be front and centre of how we think about the ecosystem working, not just the individual components. So we've just built that into all of our core processes. It's just how we operate and think. And it is getting there. Richard knows all too well. We are on a recovery job from that not being the case in the past. But certainly all of our decisions going forward will be based around those core tenets and principles.
And Matt's not alone in our experience. So many of our customers find themselves presented with that challenge that you've read about in the blueprint as well, this legacy inheritance of the way things have been done for so long, and how there's a long tail in that which will take some time and some focus to get beyond. So some things don't necessarily fail because they're old, it's the way they're fitting together with the new stuff. So the really important piece as transformations take place is to take account of that and to thoughtfully make the changes to protect the end-to-end. So take into account all the risks that are going to be brought to life by those transformation steps, and then take appropriate, proportionate action on them. And it makes no sense to completely rebuild a legacy box that actually in 2 years' time you're going to be switching off anyway, and it will serve no further business purpose. So you really need to think end to end. What are you seeking to achieve? What outcomes do you want along the way? And how do you protect your operations in the course of that journey?
Thank you, Richard. Georgina, can you add anything to that? And feel free to wander beyond the world of security, but recognising that it's underpinning all of this ultimately.
I was just going to say, I think the word risk has come up quite a few times already. Yes. And I think what we're seeing is obviously, you know, the numbers show, you can argue on the numbers because it's very hard to get an exact number, but, you know, around 50% of the IT budget across Whitehall is spent on maintaining legacy systems, on keeping the lights on the business as usual. There will be many running IT departments that perceive the risk of trying to move away from that as greater than the risk of sticking with what they've got at the moment, patching it, keeping it going. It's just too risky to move away from it because goodness knows what could go wrong. You know, this is my fiefdom. I've got this immediate need to just deliver public services. That's what's expected of me more than anything else. So I think you need to try and change the perception of risk in those two areas. The risk of keeping the legacy, which obviously has all the risk issues around cybersecurity, around not having your digital foundations in place to move on to the next stage of your digital transformation, versus the risk of doing a large transformation and getting that secure by design in place. And I think Matt brought up a few things that he's done which kind of help to lessen the risk of moving, like working with suppliers that you've got confidence in specialist areas, like concentrating on the process first and doing et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of it does come down to risk and perceived risk as well in how quickly we move on.
Okay.
And I think part of the solution to this is moving to more modern digital engineering practices. So things such as model-based systems engineering, getting away from Word documents, Excel files, so that you can see the whole of your system and you can start to do gap analysis, see the cracks in your system's important. Now, that might not mean a lot to a lot of people in here, but stay tuned and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a bit and how we're bringing that to the Environment Agency and how that's helping them.
So building further on that,
yeah.
And not as a model-based systems engineering specialist myself, just thinking through actually the amount of time some of these systems have been there, the amount that they cost to run, the reluctance to move away. How can that approach, Mark, help us to start to remediate legacy?
Okay, so you stay tuned for a very short while. I'll tell you what we did at the Environment Agency.
Is everyone okay with this? Feel free. Feel free to let me know if not.
To explain that, so model-based systems engineering provides a visual way of representing your systems, and it starts with the requirements. Those requirements go into model that then feed down into how those requirements are met, whether that's through infrastructure, through software, through people, processes, security by design, etc. You then create these models that you go and get these artifacts from, and the engineers go build the systems. The really important thing about that is if you change the requirement, a top level or a low level requirement, it cascades through the model straight away. It shows you the effects of those changes, and what you need to go change. So those cracks and those gaps are identified straight away by a model, and you can work with that. So that's the approach that we've taken with the Environment Agency. They've been on a legacy 20-year-old system that provides flood warning alerts to the public and businesses throughout the UK. It's actually mentioned on the first page of the blueprint. It's a really important critical service. And we've worked with them to help mature their thinking around these kind of models and how they are way better than Word and Excel files. I mean, you can still export into those for people to read reports and bits and pieces. And we're working with them. So that service is about to go live. And I think this goes into the backbone that is talked about in the blueprint, and how that model can be used for the Environment Agency, but then maybe that model could be used for the supply chain at the NHS. That model could be used for the DVLA, it could be used at HMRC. These models are text-based under the hood. You can start to link these models. The big picture for me is the whole of UK public infrastructure is modelled as one. You can see how a change to one part of the infrastructure affects people and processes in another place. And part of the blueprint has this idea of the technical design team. Might not be the right terminology, I can't quite remember. But for me, I think they should be more than advocates of processes and how to do things, but actually start to collate these models, start to collate ways of working and doing things, and actually become the curators of building blocks, so that when you start your next big program or somebody else starts their next big program, you've got these things that you can pick up, run with and use.
Okay, so there's an approach. There'd be huge benefits from that approach being more widely, so being used more widely. So if we kind of pick this up and start looking more holistically how we might do that, what are the things stopping us doing that, and how might we pick some of that up? So Matt picked up on points around a one-year view of funding, for example. There's many other considerations around skills in both the legacy and then how do we transform it to the future, which, Mark, you've given us a picture of. How do we actually start to move forward and drive that shared approach to remediation and then that sharing across government?
I'll use a word that was used on the stage, and I'll keep this answer really quick. The word was obvious. There's 25 ministerial departments roughly in the UK, 20 other departments, hundreds of agencies such as the Environment Agency that I've mentioned, and the language that I hear is we're doing this, we're doing that, we're streamlining this, we're doing that. There's very little of the hour together. I know that people collaborate, and it's not dissing anybody at all, but I do think that this blueprint and this idea of the Technical Design Council, I've got the word right now, bringing that up a level. We've just heard from Denmark how they've done that. Actually, why do you want 20 different teams creating cloud services and the security around cloud services for lots of different departments? Surely there's some overlap, some waste, and additional risks through doing that. So, as it was said earlier, it's obvious, but I'm sure it's very complex to fix.
So, digging into that a bit further, Matt, Georgina, based on your experiences, how do we start to fix it? Because in the nicest possible way, I've been around a while, and this legacy chat has been going on for a while. What are the things we could start to do here?
Only because I was going to say exactly what was just said. I've been around a while and I've read so many government strategies, and whether you want to call it a blueprint or a strategy or whatever. And that's why I really struggle not to be the doom monger on panels and the person that is negative about everything, because I read the strategies and the terminology might be different, but on the whole, the aims and objectives are exactly the same thing that we've been talking about for the last 20 odd years, basically. If I take defence as an example, in the recent Strategic Defence Review, you might be now be using fancy words like the digital targeting web, but what we're talking about is the connected battlefield and information intelligence and information advantage on the battlefield, which again we've been talking about for nigh on 20 years, I think. I do see nods in the strategies, like the blueprint, to doing things differently, to thinking about things differently. we might see things talked about like different governance structures or different organisational structures being put in place to tackle things differently. And I think the good thing I've seen is that these fundamental challenges, that are the things that are preventing us moving on and are meaning we're talking about the same thing 20 years later, are now being acknowledged. So you talked about the fragmentation and the silos, and I think in the blueprint they did talk about institutionalised fragmentation. So it's really good that when you're seeing those things acknowledged, but they're really tough things to solve. You know, how do you break down those silos? How do you stop people thinking in silos and start collective thinking across government? How do you stop people, like I said earlier, having that short-term thinking that how am I going to deliver the public service tomorrow? I don't need to think longer term, and start thinking more about where we're heading and where we want to get to in a decade. You know, how do you stop people trying to avoid failure, which I think is another cultural aspect of the public sector, and start helping people pursue success instead and accept that that has some inherent risks in it. It's all stuff that's very cultural, organisational and inherent in the public sector, and it's why we sit here time and time again having the same discussions, I think.
Okay. Matt, you look like you want to speak.
Yeah.
Please do.
So I think the reality is it's got to change. Right? So even in the time of NHS supply chain, and this is my first public sector gig, I said that I still think I'm the new boy, but I've been there since 2019, so I'm not really. The technical team I have running my legacy applications, my core legacy app, has gone from 10 people to 1 globally, and he's past retirement age. Right, so just the reality check point of the skills and understanding of these platforms are not in the workforce anymore, right? So change is required. And the other thing is, I think, certainly I'm seeing in our organisation, when I joined, it was quite civil servant, public sector focused. We have a lot of people have come in from private sector. We think customer first. So our conversations are around, actually, there's an NHS app that's the front door for patients. If we're doing a service that goes there, how do we connect and how do we start? So I think the thing is about starting. And you can have a grand plan and a blueprint, but what we need is each area to actually start with the small incremental steps. And that's how it will work. So, but it comes from mindset, and I think your point is right. It's culture, it's leadership, and it's people. Yeah. It's actually not about the technology, the models, or anything else. And it's about a willingness to be brave and start.
Richard, how does that present itself in the world of cyber, where you're dealing with protecting the old and the new, and of course bringing them together? And all of that involves technology, but to Matt's point, involves people too.
So the key for us is collecting the key stakeholders together and giving them a common view and a common understanding of what the consequences are of doing or not doing the things that are right in front of them. So if it's about understanding the need to replace a system or to upgrade a system for additional functionality, it will have a risk component to it, and then have a common, clear language of what those risks mean, whether they're measured financially or reputationally or whatever, but so that everyone can play a part in the decision-making, prioritisation and so on, so that as a team, you're making a joint decision about why that's the right thing to do. Everyone's committed to it in that way, and you are more likely to see a positive outcome sooner as a consequence of that. And that applies whether you're dealing with the old or the new, and it helps move people and their thinking from that old way to that new way of working, to help them understand they're in it as a team and they're in it together.
Okay. So people are at the heart of this. How, Matt, have you made some of this start to happen? So I'm just thinking of all the things that need to come together in terms of people, process and technology, and recognising that we're building the smarter state, therefore we're working within the confines of operating within a government environment. How have you started to make some of this happen? And what have been some of the challenges from a kind of governance and commercial perspective?
So it's interesting because I wear both hats. So I tend to go in a corner and have a word with myself sometimes, either from a risk and resilience point of view, or how quickly can we change and how fast can we do it. So, and that is the challenge of anyone who's leading in the world that I sit in at the moment. The first point is we are having really adult conversations with the board around where the risk profile is, where it sits, what's on a maintain and run and accept the risk strategy, what's on a no change strategy, and where do we actually need to focus first. So if I rewind 3 years as an example, our digital platform that all of our customers place orders on day in, day out would routinely fall over and time out 2 to 3 times a week. Yeah, the infrastructure behind it was rubbish, couldn't cope, the order volumes were too high, and the platform was designed to actually print the physical catalogue in the 1980s, right? So it was not a modern retail platform. But the risk-based conversation allowed us to get to we need to start the investment here. Now, normally you do your back end first and there's a logical sequence to these things, but actually it allowed us to have a very grown-up conversation around, we have to start now. We accept there will be some technical compromise because we're plugging into something that's less than ideal, but we're now on the cusp of rolling out something that's driving NPS from -20 to +60, right? Because it's been designed by customers and has the resilience and modern technology underpinning it. But it all started with a risk conversation. Yeah, because at the end of the day, if hospitals can't place orders every other week, we've got a material problem as an organisation.
Okay. More broadly, Georgina, with your view across the market, does that resonate in terms of what you're seeing elsewhere and some of the challenges making this happen? Or
Yes, I still come back to data a lot when I talk about the challenges, and I think I haven't been here long today, but the one panel debate I did see earlier, the one takeaway I will take is that it took Denmark, way smaller than us, 8 years to sort out its data foundations. I think what I'd like to see, and I think this would help in terms of collaboration between suppliers and the public sector, is for government to be much more honest about what some of this is going to take to achieve, how long it's going to take, and what the roadmap is to get there. So if you look at the National Data Library, for example, which was part of the blueprint for government, there's currently scarce information on what that is actually going to be. I think you've got some people will use that as an excuse to say, we'll wait and see what's going to come out of that. If that's going to be 8 years down the line, they're going to be waiting a hell of a long time. And I don't see any sort of incremental roadmap that says, like the guy was saying earlier from Netcompany, these are the key pieces of data that we really need to sort out first. These are the key libraries, and they're going to be available for you in 2 years' time. And if government's more transparent about that sort of thing, it enables suppliers to invest where appropriately in their solutions as well, because they know the foundations they're going to have to work with. So I think that is also one of the keys around. So that's a lot of things in there, but data, collaboration with industry, transparency, all sorts of things in one answer. I don't know where you want to go.
well, I can go anywhere now. Where I'm actually going to go is picking up on some more points in terms of where some of this is happening, because I think by looking at where it's happening and understanding where there has been progress, that gives us all learnings to understand how we repeat that progress to the point around collaboration, data, importantly trust, and Matt, your comments around that balance between risk and resilience, and at what point it becomes less scary to do something than to do nothing, almost, is what I'm hearing. Yeah. So, Mark, thinking through some of the stuff that we've been doing recently, and to your reference earlier to the work that we're doing with the Environment Agency, there is great progress in some areas in terms of driving forward, remediating legacy and actually implementing new systems. And in addition to that, there's some great work that's being done in GDS in terms of shared platforms that can be used across multiple departments. Can you share some of the work that we've been doing, and in particular how that work is able to use investment that's already been made in shared platforms?
Artificial intelligence. So what was the question?
Is that the answer?
No, we've not mentioned it yet, no. So I guess one example is we've got a long track history of working with Scottish Government. And we collaborate with Scottish Government, and as I was saying before, there's fragmented silos, lots of teams, and over the last decade there's been a move to move services to the cloud. We all know about that transformation journey. So we've been working with Scottish Government and other suppliers and partners, a whole ecosystem, really collaboratively, actually, quite refreshingly, quite honestly, having those conversations at the digital directorate level, and created a central cloud platform that us and other suppliers work on, that is now built and has started to onboard Scottish departments and agencies and bits and pieces into that. But there's still challenges to get everybody in and remove those silos, but it's definitely working. We're getting there. Some of the challenges are, oh no, I've got this great cloud team, they're way better than yours, or we're way more advanced, we're not going to come to your platform. Well, that's great. But that's the business angle, right? That's the cultural piece. That's understanding, sitting down and saying, actually, really, what's the risk of keep going like this, right? So yeah, it's going really well, Ross. And we are bringing customers on, they're happy, and they get that benefit of shared experience, shared lessons learned, quicker to deploy, develop, and it's cheaper.
Okay.
Can I ask a question quickly? Was there any sort of burning platform, do you think, in Scotland? Did the budgetary pressures get so bad that that collaboration almost became a necessity?
Not that I'm totally aware of, but what I would say is maybe Scotland, and careful how I frame this, is a smaller ecosystem than the wider UK, right? Yeah. 5 million people, a smaller government, less powers than central government has because they only have devolved powers. So it was easier to bring the players together and be one. And Scotland, to be fair, are united in being Scottish and say, yeah, look, we're going to be the first and we're going to do this and we're going to show the rest of the UK actually how we should unite and play nicely together and do that, rather than, oh, there's a burning platform and if we don't get off it, we're all going to frazzle.
Okay. Heads up, I've got one more question for the panel and then I'm going to be coming to the audience for questions, if you can start thinking about that. So let's pick up that example, Mark, which is a great example of a build once, use many approach, which is dealing with legacy, which is dealing with risk, and actually collaborative, but with one of the biggest kind of considerations and challenges being the kind of people process element rather than the tech. So the foundation says the tech works fine, but actually we need to make this stuff happen. You mentioned the Technical Design Council earlier. Is that the right name? Because I took two notes of it.
It is.
Okay. Which brings me all the way back to kind of where we started on the panel, which says we've got some really good examples, but we're approaching all of those examples probably with a bit of long-held cynicism, I think it would be fair to say. How do we keep moving forward that collaboration between industry and government, recognising no one can do this on their own? How do we move that forward? So how do we do more quickly so we're not here having this same conversation in another 5 years' time?
I think Georgina said it, it's that transparency from the people that have the purse strings and the pipeline to show what the pipeline is, work with industry to help develop that pipeline, not be scared to reveal themselves a little bit more and help us understand what that is so that we can get in and shape, and not think that every supplier that comes to you that's trying to help shape something is nefarious and just there to try and get as much profit as they can, and we want you to ourselves and this is the system you need. But work with lots of people, you'll get a rounded view, and just be transparent. I mean, it's public money. We will pay for it. It should be transparent.
It's treating the industry as a partner rather than as a vendor as such, isn't it? A transformation partner.
Strategic partners, absolutely.
Does that resonate with you, Matt?
Yeah, and that's how I expect my suppliers to operate.
Okay.
Yeah, so they are an extension of my team in terms of how we work. That is the mindset and how I expect everyone to show up. And when we do that, we make the right choices most of the time. And so we're starting that journey.
And Richard, that is what we're doing, right?
Absolutely. So one of the key things about the opportunity that Matt presented was that partnering and the ability to work so closely with his in-house team, which is so far so good. 8 months into the journey, and absolutely seamless ways of working together. But it's not just the cyber team; it's the ability to work with the other teams that Matt has and the other suppliers that he's mentioned. To be able to lift the whole game in that same way, and that makes a big difference. And all of the areas where I've worked in Leidos over the years have been far more effective when that partner working is strong and you are taking that collective view from the different perspectives and the different strengths that people bring, and then bringing that together and making a better solution happen faster.
Thank you. So, looking out to the room, have we got any questions from the audience? I don't know if, have we got mics for the audience, or are we, okay, so, go for shouting, brilliant.
Okay, I will project. You guys have talked about a lot of different things and a lot of examples, which are all great. But what's the one thing, the golden thread, or mixing my metaphors, the one thing that you can tie around in a bow that brings us that strength and an extension of the digital? Sorry, I missed my chance. You might have to repeat for them.
So what is the one thing, and I think the word used was golden thread, that enables us to bring together strengthening and extending digital public infrastructure? Is that right? Yeah.
Is there one thing?
I don't know.
I think it starts and ends with people first, and the willingness to have the conversations. That's where we've made great inroads, is actually starting to really dig into it and go, how are we going to tackle this stuff? And it not be the sales pitch versus that I've just got my budget and I'm going to live in my bunker and hope it will be all right. But you have to do that at a company level and then wider.
Yeah, and there's some cultural things as well for UK public services. So public services are not reprimanded for running their particular services well. Well done, great, but I've done it in a silo. So the carrot and the stick can be kind of a little bit different. So if you think about NHS surgeries throughout the UK, doctors' surgeries, and the NHS say, oh, we're going to do a review of lung cancer, send me all your data about your patients with lung cancer and bits and pieces. And this is real. Lots of doctors' surgeries will send information and some won't, because they're really worried about breaking GDPR rules, right? Or if I send the wrong information and I get it wrong, I'm going to be reprimanded severely. So I will not share and I will not collaborate. Mm-hmm. That's back to front in my view. What it should be is the carrot should be you need to share, we will help you share, and the carrot is for sharing and actually get reprimanded for saying no. And there's a cultural thing there about, hey, my business, my department runs really well. If I open it up and work with somebody else and extend and strengthen and come together, it might not work so well, so I daren't do that. I want to keep my service green, my MSP to stand up in government, in Parliament and say, yes, everything's tickety-boo, thank you very much. But it doesn't really help that centralisation. And then that's a cultural change.
Yeah, the word you didn't use was fear. I think that's what we're getting to, really. It's the fear, when it comes to data sharing, there's a huge fear of what you're allowed to share and not allowed to share, and people tend to err on the side of caution. So there's a lot of education that needs to go on as well, I think, across the public sector to break down that fear and enable people to move at a faster pace.
So what is the golden thread? Because is the golden thread collaboration, or actually is the golden thread something that forces almost forces collaboration. We chatted about fun and forced fun. Is the golden thread almost more of a stick to then create carrots ultimately?
I think we are scared in this country of, actually because it hasn't worked in the past, of telling, of the centre of Whitehall telling departments what to do. Because at the end of the day, they can't really. The departments have got the thing they need to do, and they will do it, and they can't mandate certain things from the centre. So there's a fear of using a stick, I think. But I think there are cases where we do need to be a bit more prescriptive about what needs to be done. And I think if you listen to the Denmark example, there were clear. It was clear that in a lot of cases there were rules put in place and legislation put in place. This is the way you have to behave now. And I do wonder whether there does need to be more of that. But does the UK culture allow for that sort of behaviour? I don't know.
Okay, great question. Really great question. Any more questions from the audience? Okay, no? Any closing comments, albeit I think the golden thread question probably hit a lot of them, but any closing comments from the panel in terms of strengthening and extending digital public infrastructure and how government and industry come together to do that?
My takeaway would be support the blueprint as much as you can, support the technical design whatnot council, right? Feed into that, have ideas, raise them from the floor up, wherever you may be, up through your leadership and others, because they won't be able to enact on anything unless they get that information from people at the coalface and start to understand what the issues are. A large part of my job is working with my customers to understand day-to-day bits and pieces, and some of those lead to some of the most revolutionary technology that we actually go on and produce because they solve real-world problems. So very user-centric, find out what's hurting, harming, stopping your citizens and staff, etc., and just raise it, bring it up. Have some mechanism in every department, agency, wherever you sit, to get that information to that technical design council, because they won't be able to do anything. They won't know all the information themselves. So that's my key takeaway for you guys.
Thank you. Georgina?
I'm trying to think of something optimistic. I think my worry is that there's always going to be short-termism in government, that the things that are hard to do, take many years, will always get put on the back burner because politically if it goes wrong, after 4 years you're going to be in trouble, basically. I think it does need to come down to the way people behave more on the ground, the civil servants. I think trying to behave differently, getting rid of that fear and collaborating more, not just within the public sector, but with the supplier community as well. And acting as we should be, that what we want to achieve is of benefit to everybody. And we should stop thinking in our little fiefdoms and little silos and start thinking about the bigger picture. But that's a big cultural change that is not going to happen overnight.
Matt?
Yeah, I think it's being brave and having the conversations rather than just accepting the status quo. I think that's point number one. And point number two is actually to think about the team and the capabilities, and just start somewhere, and with modern modular IT now, you can actually you don't have to go with a £100 million programme to start to make progress. And the third bit is the relationship between yourselves as the customer and your suppliers who are executing fundamentally has to be right. And I think that's very, very different to the types of models I've been buying and working with for the last 25 years. And we're deliberately and consciously doing that to get quicker results and a different type of outcome. So they're the things I'd take away.
Thank you. Rachel?
Take a well-informed view on how to do what Matt just said. Make a start on something that you can see is going to make a tangible difference to the way people are working and their experience, get the outcomes understood so that people can focus on that, keep things simple and start to deliver. And delivery success will generate more delivery success.
Okay, thank you. I think we have started to take the blueprint to brilliant. So I think whilst a little scepticism, actually some great examples of positive progress in driving towards brilliance that is already being built. So a huge thank you to the panel, a lot to reflect on there, but really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience for listening. I hope you've taken some good insights from that to take back and think about. So thank you very much. Thank you.